All right. Hey, it's the Easter episode. Hey, Christy, how's it going?
Hey, happy Zombie Jesus Day.
Happy Zombie Jesus Day. You ready to do this?
Let's do it.
All right.
I'm jazzed up. I need that intro.
Dude, I'm sorry. I got caught up. Welcome to Talk Heathen, everybody. Today is April 4th, 2021. It is season 5, episode 14. I'm Eric Murphy, and with me today is Christy Powell. Christy.
Hey, howdy, hey. I'm doing all right. I'm shot out of a cannon. I need, doing the nonprofits and Talk Heathen, like secular sexuality needs maybe a little bit more of a punk rock kind of vibe to it, man. Like,
dude, you're just busy as heck. You're all over the place. It's like you're making the rounds through everything. So
I'm an ACA slut this week, and happy for it. I'm an ethical slut, and excited to Talk Heathen with you.
Well, rock on. Before we do, though, speaking of being an ethical slut, who the hell are you for people who don't know who you are or what you do?
I prefer to be introduced that way and just leave the mystery. But no, I am a gender and sexuality therapist here in Austin. I specialize in issues of religious trauma, and I am the host of the ACA's Secular Sexuality Thursday nights at 7, where we talk about all of those kinds of issues and how our sexuality intersects with religion in usually some pretty painful ways, and maybe how to heal from that and how to create maybe a safer world.
I absolutely love it. I try my best. I usually never miss an episode of Secular Sexuality. I'm usually always watching, and what you have brought, the guests that you've brought and the subjects you've covered has really done a lot for me personally when it comes to the way that I view my sex, my gender, myself, and the way I view others, and the way we look at things like, shame and the way we socially stigmatize things like sex work, and the fact that you address that every week in different and fun ways is just fantastic. So for those of you who are watching who have not seen Secular Sexuality, set your alarms, do something, write it on your calendar. Secular Sexuality on Thursdays. But then today, right after this, you're going to be on the nonprofits.
Yeah, super excited about that. The nonprofits was actually my first appearance with the ACA like a million years ago, and so to get invited back in this like sort of retooled, hyper professional version of the show was just super exciting. So yeah, I hope people will stick around. I'd say don't touch that dial, but I understand that's not really how YouTube works anymore. I don't know. Our crew is making fun of me for not understanding basically the internet, but it was a good time, so I'm excited to watch that along with y'all.
It is so good, and it's been so fun watching the nonprofits. It's been around for over 15 years, and in every incarnation it's taken on so much of the personalities of the people who are on it, and watching the way that it has just zeroed in and is kicking butt now is really, really fun to watch. I agree with you, man. So before we dive into calls, I've got a couple regular announcements. The first we already hit is that the nonprofits is going to be at 3 after this. So stay tuned after the show, head over to the nonprofits and give them a check, give them a look, because they're awesome. And Christy's going to be there too. The second announcement that's regular is Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. And if you like what we do and you want to support us, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/talkheathen to me. That's patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. We're 2/3 of the way through the episode. I think our top 5 patrons got it right up here on the board. I refresh it. So if you want to hear your name right today, patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. It sounds like I've kind of done this a couple of times, right?
Yeah, a few times. Consummate professional.
Oh, shucks. We do have a couple of, oh, wow, we've got some really good callers, but I want to see some more theist callers. I understand today is a holiday for Christians. Today is Zombie Jesus Day, like you put it. That's where according to the legend, Jesus rose again and may or may not have sought brains. If you believe, call us, because we want to talk to you about it. If you want to call us, you can call 512-991-9242, or if you want to call via the internet, Go to tiny.cc/callth. That's tiny.cc/callth. And usually the connection's fantastic using that. So definitely consider doing that. That said, I'm ready to dive into calls. How about you?
Yeah, let's do it. Bring it on.
Okay. I really want to start off by talking to Kale Chip in Kentucky. Kale Chip, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Hey, so just to
Hey.
to update Christy and people who didn't watch last week, do you want to kind of fill them in on what we talked about last week?
Yeah, so first of all, I realized that my delay is a lot longer than I thought it was last time, so that's not good. But last week I came in to ask about basically how to set I'm so sorry. I'm really discombobulated right now. Basically, how to set boundaries while mourning death, like in the presence of religious people. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, we talked a good bit about making sure that those boundaries are set and that you're saying, hey, here's what I'm comfortable with. Having a therapist here on the line is something I'm really grateful for because I'd love to get his opinion on it. But just to kind of update, it says in the notes that you did it. You visited your friend's grave and you interacted with those people. How did it go?
Well, yeah, so I ended up going at a time where other people weren't there, which was really good. Like, I guess we just went earlier on in the day and didn't run into anyone. So it was just me and my husband and one of my friends. And while we were there, we just talked about like memories that we had with this person. And I wrote him a letter and I left it on his headstone, and it was really nice. It was healing, I would say. Yeah, I did want to mention that I feel like last time I sounded too cynical because, like, it's not that I've had any specific negative interactions with the people that I was thinking of, but I guess my anxiety forces me into like a worst case scenario headspace as like a protection mechanism, you know?
Yeah, your guard's up. It makes sense to be at your most defensive when you're at your most vulnerable. And, you know, that defensiveness may not actually be serving you. It may not be in your best interest, but I think we can have a little bit of compassion for where you're coming from and for that need right there. I'm glad that you had that opportunity. It sounds like it was a much needed bit of respite during a time of mourning. Yeah.
Yeah. This weekend has been like very emotionally strenuous, and I actually like just found out this morning that my family cat passed away. So that doesn't help, you know.
No, I'm so sorry. The thing is, no matter how you approach it, no matter what, what you're feeling when it comes to, feeling angry or snarky or cynical or anything like that, just looking at the comments from your call last week, there are people who connected with you. And in the live chat, people who went, I'm dealing with a similar thing, or I've had to deal with the same thing. And I remember when we talked, I told you I'm still angry about the way they handled my grandmother's funeral. And so it's absolutely okay. Being your authentic self is something that can be really, really cathartic, not just for, your experience, but I think for people who are watching who may not be able to express themselves the way they wish they could. So.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've struggled with. I mean, especially the anger. I feel like I identified where most of it was coming from on Friday because, like, since I was with my friend, I just told him, like, I don't know what to do with all this anger inside me right now. And he asked, why I think I feel angry. And I said that I don't know, like, it just doesn't feel fair, that we get to miss out on, making more memories. And he said that he definitely feels like we've been robbed. And that's just when it clicked. And like, yeah, it makes me want to, you know, almost go back to like being 12 years old and like waving my fist in the air and being like, God, why would you do this? But it's like, I have to deal with that internally now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's value though in having those emotions validated and having somebody put a little bit of a label on them for you. It sounds like that's been part of the challenge here is not knowing or not being surrounded by people that maybe shared those emotions and probably weren't doing a great job of holding space or creating a little bit of room to validate the fact that you're feeling anger and you're allowed to feel angry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But I'm really glad that things turned out and that you were able to kind of have that experience. I know we asked you to call back, and it feels really good getting that kind of closure, at least on our end, hearing how things went for you. So thank you for following up, and thank you for checking in.
Well, I did. I feel like my question last time was less pointed than I wanted it to be. And like, you know, speaking of anger, I guess I was just wondering if you guys had more advice on like how not to be angry at religious people while, you know, responding to common religious tropes while like that you might hear at funerals and stuff.
Ooh. All right. I know that I've said my fair piece on this before. Christy, what do you think?
Yeah, you know, I might start by encouraging you to let yourself feel angry. Yeah, I don't think the goal here is to not be angry. Whatever you're feeling, that's just what you're feeling, whether you're happy, whether you're sad, whether you want to shoot somebody, like those are just the emotions. Your actions, on the other hand, that's something that I want you to be a little bit more mindful of. You're allowed to feel angry. And I feel like if you are telling yourself not to be angry at religious people, don't be angry at religious people, all you're going to succeed in doing is not getting rid of the anger, but just sort of convincing yourself that you had until you sort of blinded yourself to it. And then you all of a sudden are going to have all of these big emotions and they're coming out of nowhere. You find yourself in a conversation and you're like, stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. And next thing you know, you're shouting and you don't know why. And it's because you've been angry this whole time, but just convincing yourself that you're not. So I want to encourage you to be okay with being angry. The question becomes, how do you maybe release that anger a little bit? And how do you keep from being aggressive or violent with it? And I think that starts by just having a little bit of compassion for yourself, being able to say, of course I'm angry. This is an angering situation. What kind of human being wouldn't be angry in this moment? With my experiences, with everything I've been through, with everything that's happening right now, it makes sense for you to be angry. So instead of pretending that you're not, just acknowledge that you are and be willing to do something about that. And the do something here can be anything from going on a run to taking a long bath to just being angry while watching old episodes of The Office or whatever else you do to be able to relax and show yourself a little bit of kindness. You know, that word compassion just means being willing to be with the pain. And so if you are pretending that you're not angry, then it's preventing you from actually doing something about that anger. So I'd encourage you to start there by just being present with and accepting of those emotions. And then if you can show yourself a little bit of kindness, then you'll be set up to make your most wise-minded decisions and to only do things that you can feel proud of rather than letting that aggression come out and show itself in those ways.
That's beautifully put, Christy.
Yeah.
My goodness.
That was awesome. I mean, it kind of went in a direction that I wasn't expecting, but it was, yeah, that's eye-opening. I can definitely bring that to my therapist.
Good. The only other thing that I could possibly add is just recognizing that for the most part, most people who are perpetuating these ideas of they're in a better place and all of that, most of the time they're not doing it maliciously. Most of the time they're convinced it's true. Mm-hmm. And that makes them, I mean, I know it may sound grating to a religious person hearing it, but I think in this context, they're also victims of that indoctrination as well. And you know, when you're in that, perpetuating it is just kind of built into that cycle. And so it's not always necessary to, I don't know, be angry with them when they are in their own journey, on their own process, but they're probably not being malicious. I don't know. I don't know your situation, but it helps me.
Right. Yeah. I think it's because like when they say things like that, I just kind of, the way it hits me is that they're just assuming that everyone around them, you know, shares the same views that they do, which automatically comes off as condescending. But, you know, I tend to forget, at least in that moment, that they're not thinking about that. They're just kind of trying to soothe themselves.
Yeah, and finding that little bit of empathy makes sense. And that is a way to diffuse some of this anger by just kind of focusing on that common humanity. The fact that they are also struggling with something and going about it in some different ways, and some ways that may not be all that evidence-based and may not actually be all that helpful, but that at least from their own point of view and with their own experiences, they've come to by honest means, and that make a certain kind of sense to them, even if they don't necessarily line up. But it is invalidating to be expected to hold on to these beliefs that just don't make sense. And that sense of being invisible is a thing that causes and stirs up frustration and anger in the best of us. So there's nothing to apologize for when it comes to what you're feeling. It's only your words and your actions that I would encourage you to take a little bit more ownership of. And it sounds like you're working hard to do that.
Cheers. Hey, Kale Chip.
Yeah.
We're going to head over to the next call, but thank you for following up with us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to ask one last thing. Since there were a lot of people in the comments saying that, like, rep your music or whatever, I haven't uploaded anything publicly, but do you mind if I, like, share what my friend's band is, the one who passed away?
Yeah, you know, as good as you've been, I'm happy to go for it.
Awesome.
For people who want to hear Kale Chip's friend who recently passed, how can we hear their music?
You can find them on Spotify. They also have an Instagram account, but they're called Astronomy Club, and they just released like a memorial EP. So
nice,
pretty awesome.
Maybe drop a link in the Talk Heathen Facebook fan group for any fans that are curious and showing a little bit of support.
Yeah. All right, Kale Chip, take care.
I will put it in the live chat.
Okay, take care.
Fair enough. You have a good night.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Oh, that's right. We record this show in the afternoon, right? Yeah, sorry.
Dude, it's
not night.
No worries. So I have a theist call that I really want to get to, but just kind of on the back of the call we just had, I think it'd be really fun to talk to Laura in Arizona. Laura in Arizona. Can you hear us okay? Laura? Laura going once.
Shoot, I'm sorry, I had you on mute.
Hey, there you are. No worries. It says in the notes that you want to talk about the problem of evil, and I feel like that kind of is right on path with the last call that we had. Do you want to talk about what you wanted to ask about?
Oh gosh, you're right. It does. Yes. So I am personally an atheist. My mom is a theist. And we like to talk about, things that have to do with like morals and what the world is like and everything. Recently, she was talking about, for lack of a better term, the problem of evil and how, let's see if I can say this right.
Sure.
Well, actually, we'll skip that for a second. The thing is that once she explained her view on this, I couldn't quite put into words why this view bothered me so much.
Yeah.
It's like something about it bugged the crap out of me, and I just could not put it into words. So hopefully y'all can help with that.
Yeah. Just so people who haven't heard of the term problem of evil, it's this idea that how can an all-loving, all-powerful God allow bad things to happen, right? If God is sitting there watching you suffer, because they're omnipresent and they're omnipotent, they can change it at any point, then why do they continue to allow you to suffer? Or why would God create a world where, children die of cancer and there's starvation and all of this suffering in the world, this problem of evil, how can a good God allow evil to exist?
Especially if he happens to be, omnipowerful or whatever, that he literally has the power to change things, but either can't or doesn't for whatever reason.
And I think oftentimes the responses that I've gotten are God is testing you. God wants you to have a stronger character, which I think if you were to equate that to a parent and a child, that child should be taken away by social services as quickly as possible. Because I don't think there's a lesson that's worth you lopping off a child's limb or, harming them, or murdering them, so that alone is absolutely not a one-to-one comparison. The other explanation that I've got is that we live in a fallen world, and it's only because of our sin that exists in the first place, as if bad behavior can manifest, bad, like other non-related bad things.
Which is often, attributed to free will, and that, humans have free will to do awful things if they so desire.
So it's your fault that there's evil in the world. It's your fault that there are problems. And I'll throw in my favorite, coming from God himself, response to this question of the problem of evil is like, who the hell are you to ask? Where were you when I laid down the foundations of the earth? I'm the Leviathan, and fuck you, little puny human, for even being bothered to ask. And if that answer is not just absolutely infuriating, I don't know what is. In each of these cases, we're talking about something that takes the problem of evil, that takes the hurt and the pain and the suffering in the world, and gives a pat answer that doesn't hold up to investigation, and that feels just really dismissive. And it makes sense to feel bothered when your suffering is not being validated, when you're being dismissed in these ways.
Yeah. If
that is definitely true.
I would look into a lot of the comparisons when it comes to an abusive relationship. When you have a loved one or a parent gaslight you, abuse you, and make you think that it's your fault that they needed to abuse you, right? If you hadn't behaved this way, I wouldn't have to hit you, and then this kind of love bombing, right? Nobody can love you like I can love you, right? This Jesus, coming into you and giving you this everlasting love, that nobody else could ever give. I mean, it feels like it's just right down the playbook.
Or the whole, this hurts me more than it hurts you kind of a thing.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. And so hopefully, at least in processing it, that was a game changer for me when I equated that to a very abusive relationship and went, holy crap, it's about time for me to break up with Jesus.
Well, and you spoke to Hector Garcia not too many months ago. He's been on a number of ACA shows before, and his book, Alpha God, I think does a really good job of exploring this idea of how we put God into this position of being like the troop leader in our tribe of chimpanzees. And it's really problematic when you do that, because you start to see the abuse and the aggression and these different things. And when we interpret that through a modern light where we have any compassion for one another or any understanding of the scientific world, it all starts to fall apart. But at the very least, we can start to see why these things bother us so much, and which particular buttons and which particular manipulations are being played with.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps kind of put some words to it. I'm chuckling because someone in the live chat, I think their autocorrect kicked in because it says agave love. And for people who don't have the background, I think they meant to say agape love, which is this kind of, boundless, limitless love that a God can give. But I think I prefer agave love. So might celebrate some agave love with some tequila later. But Laura, is there anything else before we head over to the next call?
I guess the biggest thing is that the way she described her solution to the problem of evil, it sounded so much like victim blaming. I think it was on the line the other day. Someone who was disabled was talking to Matt and was saying something to the effect of like, people, religious people would look at him and be like, God is testing you or is trying to use you to help other people lift you up. And even though it was God that gave you this quote unquote gift, and he was just like, it's so condescending.
Yeah.
And
again,
the biggest point of what my mom's view is that in the pre-earth life, because that's a thing that our religion
ooh, are you Mormon?
Thing. Yes, I am Mormon.
Nice.
It's a fun and interesting religion. Once you're out of it, you can actually look at everything objectively.
Yeah.
Anyways, her view is that in the pre-earth life, we basically kind of selected things that we wanted to learn in this life, for lack of a better term, but we wouldn't know necessarily how God was going to teach us these things. She used the example of her marriage. She married my dad, then had an affair, and ended up splitting with my dad and marrying the other guy. So before that, she had always been very judgmental of people who had affairs or had divorced or remarried or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then having gone through it herself, she was a lot more compassionate and empathetic to people like that. And so she
Funny how that works.
Excused it in her own mind as like she had chosen that she wanted to learn empathy in the pre-earth life, and this is how God had decided to teach it to her.
Well,
or something to that effect. And it felt so victim blamey.
Doesn't it?
Stand it.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out how to explain that though, because she's like, no, of course it's not victim blaming.
Well, and also though, it also, I think, possibly can make them feel like they're taking ownership of a situation that they're not able to control themselves. And in doing that, it can be less scary. I think also people want to be special. People want to feel like they're special and that they have special powers and they have special abilities and they have this, unique, incredible thing about them that makes them so much more than anybody else. And I think that kind of holier than thou attitude can come from that, at least in my experience. But I hope that that helps. I know that we usually don't take so many atheist callers right at the front of the show, but these two calls were just so close together. I mean, that was yeah. But feel free to call back, and thank you for calling in.
Well, you are very welcome. I'm glad that I didn't break your brain with tulpas this time.
Nope. Oh, it's you.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to tulpa it up later, but that is a call for another day.
Thanks so much.
Indeed.
Christy, have you heard about tulpas?
No, that's a new one on me.
I am going to send you links and you are going to hate me for it. All right.
Got that to look forward to. Great.
Mm-hmm. So we're finally going to move to a theist caller. We do want to talk to more religious callers. I know that it is Easter weekend, Easter Sunday, but if you are watching and you believe, give us a call. Tell us what you believe and why, because we want to talk to you about it. We are going to talk to Eric in Iowa. Eric, you're talking to Eric and Christy.
Hello
What would you like to say?
there.
Hey.
Hi, I think there may be a slight delay, but however, yes, I'm Eric from Iowa. Love you guys' show. Also love Atheist Experience. So moving on. Atheist Christian here. Grew up in a sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Grew up Pentecostal. I was my mom's only child that grasped onto the Pentecostal beliefs and everything of that nature. I grew up a good Christian boy, this, that, and the other, then backslided. Don't go to church no more. It's a bunch of bullshit. Oh, sorry.
You can. It's all right. There's not a restriction on cussing on the show. You're good.
Okay, great. And so, but I'm I'm calling because I am pro-abortion, and it hit me when I'm 40 years old, but when I was a teenager reading the Old Testament and things of that nature, man, I was doing a lot of questioning, and I started thinking, well, yeah, I think it's more than the New Testament. I was thinking, well, if babies do not go to hell, and I think the age of reasoning is 12 or something like that. If they die before 12 or 10, unfortunately, and they go straight to heaven, then what is the problem with a mother or female, that's getting an abortion? The child goes straight to heaven. So why are you Christians going crazy about a female that's having an abortion? And I never understood that, still don't. I've been listening to you guys' arguments as well as the theist arguments. I'm still a little bit confused, but I'm mainly calling to see if you guys can poke some holes in my rationality, if I'm even rational or whatever. I know me believing in God is like, still like, no, first of all, let's start with that.
Well,
I kind of understand that, but it's just more of my concern of,
well, I mean, calling yourself a Christian still and an atheist, I think that the language that you're using might.
I'm still.
Hmm?
Oh, I'm not an atheist. I still say I'm a Christian.
Okay. Okay. So, well, then that takes care of that. What I was going to say is there's actually an amazing history there. It is so cool to look into because that was totally a thing. There was a time when it was not uncommon for young women to kill babies, like just find somebody else's kid and chuck them in the river. And the reason they would do it is because they would know that the baby would immediately go to heaven. So that's fine. But they know that if they commit suicide, they go to hell. And so if they kill the baby, then they'll be sentenced to death. And it would be a way of committing suicide that you could still go to heaven for. And it was a loophole that got used a lot.
And that line of reasoning, when you extrapolate it out, can get really messy really, really quickly. I mean, why not just go ahead and murder everybody when they're born if we're promising them eternity in heaven? And, you know, if you start to find yourself going down that line of thinking, it's probably a good idea to stop, pause, and check in on some of your premises. The first one here being the assumption that all children under 10 or 12 go to heaven, which is something that has been pretty hotly debated throughout, really throughout theocratic philosophy. I don't know that there is a consensus on that in any portion of the church.
Yeah. But just that whole thing, there's a lot more to it than most people recognize. If you want to explore it, it is a very human conversation that's been had for a very, very, very long time. And eventually it became a kind of a capital sin to kill a baby. And they kind of put a stop to the young women murdering babies thing. But just as you go along, you know, we still find examples that there are times, even in recent memory, that there have been kind of fire and brimstone, end of the world preachers who are saying, you know, hey, this, like I think it was Harold Camping, I believe. There was a mother who killed her daughters because she didn't want her daughters to go through the experience of the end of the world, and so sent them to heaven early. You know, it's a, and I know this is not an abortion topic, right? We're talking about children.
Yeah, but
But just kind of when it comes to the way we treat those things, if you have kind of this magical view of the world, you can wind up with some, like Christy said, some really, really weird effects.
okay. Well, I've never thought about it that way. Everything that you guys said never even came to me. So I'm glad that you brought that to my attention. Because I was just stuck on just the abortion portion. Terminating a pregnancy. And I learned that language from Tracy and Matt watching the previous shows. It's terminating a pregnancy. I'm sorry if I still got it wrong, but thank you guys for that knowledge. I had no idea that individuals was killing children as a loophole to have them to go to heaven. I literally did not know that. I heard about that one woman many years ago, but I didn't know that that was something that people were doing so far history-wise. So that's mind-blowing.
There's also prescription for abortion in the Bible. When it comes to abortion as a topic, I think Christy and the show that he hosts on Thursdays, Secular Sexuality, would probably be able to handle that a whole lot better than at least I could. I know my limits. I'm just some dude on the internet.
Okay.
Christy, what do you think?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're taking on abortion writ large, there's a lot of different schools of thought and a lot of different ways to tackle it. But I guess the primary position of most folks is that it comes down to bodily autonomy. The idea that you have the right not to have your body turned into a gestation suit for anybody else, and that you have the right and the ownership to your own body. There are some different ways to tease that apart and some reasonable objections to that argument, and a lot of other schools of thought and different ways to approach this conversation. But that might be something for you to maybe digest, and then perhaps give us a call on Thursday nights at 7.
I actually will, because I do want to have some other questions specifically for that show. And I'm just going to kind of end it right now, but I just want to say this little comment. I love you guys. Even though I'm a Christian theist, I don't believe a lot of the Christian stuff that they say anymore that I grew up with.
Oh.
And I had a lot of questions thinking that I was sinful, thinking that I was bad, because if you question God, if you question one of the ministers or the church mothers or the deacons, you're shunned, you're placed either on the mourners. I don't know if y'all know about the mourners bench, but we had the mourners bench, all type of stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, what is wrong with me? And so many years later, I come across this show. Well, I came across the show because of Holy Kool-Aid. I was watching False Prophecies, and then somehow it hit on Holy Kool-Aid's sidekick, false sidekicks, and then it latched on to Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience, and you guys were busting out all the questions that I did not know to have, and questions that I did have that not even my minister, the pastor, my parents could answer, and you guys drop the ball. Drop the bomb. Not the ball. Drop the ball. So I want to thank you guys so much for helping me emotionally, helping me through my process of thinking. I know I still got some wrong stuff, but thank you so much, and I'm going to hang up. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
So you know, you got love rings from the crew. You got a lot of love in the chat, and people are really glad you called in, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Take care. So I actually got a reminder too that during those first 2 calls, I should have been plugging Recovering from Religion. The Hotline Project is a huge resource that people can call into or message. It is a peer-to-peer kind of program that just allows people to kind of, you know, you're feeling alone, you call up and you just talk with somebody for a while. And I was one of those people, and a lot of us do, you know, when we can, we'll volunteer for the Hotline Project. But it's not just that. If you also go to Recovering from Religion, you can find Christy, is it right? The Secular Therapy Project is also through RFR?
Yes, yeah, and you can, they have their own website, I believe, the seculartherapyproject.org, but you can get all that through, or seculartherapy.org, but you can get there through RFR as well.
Yeah. So if you need to, want to, would like to definitely contacting them and seeing if you can get set up with a secular therapist, or if you're in the Austin area and Christy's got some room on the docket. I don't know. Am I allowed to pimp your private practice?
Hey, you go right ahead.
Hey,
People
Christy, what's
can
the
find
name
me
of
all
your
over
practice?
Valence Counseling.
Valence Counseling. So how
yeah,
can people
folks can find me.
Valence Counseling?
ValenceCounseling.com, VCATX.com, or just search for Christy Powell and avoid anything with YouTube connected to it.
Come on, I got a shell for you a little bit, man. I love what you do.
Hey, I'll take it on. Thanks so much.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on and let's talk to Tim in Florida, who has a question for you, Christy. Tim, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you fine.
Hey,
Eric,
you're talking to Eric and Christy. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, my question is to Christy,
Mhm.
and it's a professional question. It involves what is the standard non-believer who's also a non-professional consumer of therapy, which I was in at one point, and I'm not the only person that this professional treated, but I was misdiagnosed by every which way you can conceive the DSM, anything, even the psychiatrist that's prescribing medications specifics. This fell through the cracks, and it turns out it was. I think it was intentional bias from a religious culture. Now, I turn over a lot of my life to professionals that have licenses in medicine, et cetera, that have religions, and I have no problem with that. One of my physicians kisses a rug 5 times a day, and he is a wonderful physician, and I trust my life with him. I have no problem with his personal religion, but I wouldn't know. I have a general clue when he would cross the line of intentional cultural bias that would result in a misdiagnosis. What should a general non-professional like myself? I'm just a dumb engineer. I make things out of stuff that smart people tell me is possible to do, and then I try to do it cheaper than other people, and that's why I'm good at it. But what should a non-professional be looking for when you can actually, what kind of telltale signs could a biased cultural, even religion, and I'm specifically talking about the religion. And my specific case was, you're gay, you're sick.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's that simple. It goes back many, many years. It goes back to the pre-1970s escape from.
Right. To clarify just a little bit, you're talking about the experience of being in therapy, effectively working with a bad therapist and wanting to maybe avoid that by looking for like red flags before you step on the actual landmine. Do I have your question right there?
Right, but the resources that you gentlemen and your organizations are presenting us today were not available to me back then. You need to understand that. And so I went down the rabbit hole with this therapist, and it was a total, it led to many years of wasted time and money. And
we're sorry to hear that.
They were flat out wrong.
We're sorry to hear that. Christy, do you know
I'm old. Your problems, but there still has to be this contamination.
Well, let's ask
because
Christy.
I have it. I mean, I see it in myself.
Gotcha.
So what should the average person be looking for?
Okay.
Yeah, see that's a good question that I may be able to answer. What the average person should be looking for, and that's going to depend on you. What research shows us over and over and over again is that more important than the type of therapist that you're working with, the nature of their licensure or the type of degree they have, more important than the particular theoretical orientation, their style of therapy, what they're focusing on, more important than where they went to school or their education or their certifications. All of that pales in comparison in terms of its impact and their ability to work well with you compared to that relationship, compared to how comfortable you feel when you're talking to them. The most important part of any therapy process is just going to be whether or not this feels like somebody that you can trust. And, that doesn't mean necessarily that you walk in on the first day and you decide whether or not you like them. But beyond liking them, if you don't feel comfortable around them, then they're not going to be a good therapist for you. I don't care how talented they are. I don't care how brilliant they are. They're not going to be able to do good work with you if you don't feel like you can trust them. And trust is earned. It takes a little bit of time to work up to it. And so I don't want you to feel like that consultation is everything, but that initial conversation is important. And I want to encourage you to lean into your instincts as to whether or not you feel comfortable. Beyond that, I don't know that you need to be overly stressed about some of these things. Trust but verify. If they say something that doesn't pass the smell test, maybe investigate it, bring it back to them, and try to talk to them about it. But I don't know that there is a particular strategy here for how to avoid dumbass therapists. And yeah, we could certainly get into more of that and go on and on all day. But I think that's the takeaway I'd like to leave you with.
Okay. Tim, hope that helps.
Well, it helps. I wish, I want to stress to the average people listening, average Joe like me, the value of the resources that you're providing, because there's not an official medical list of people that's not going to, that have degrees, but yet they dose out batshit. I mean, there's still going to be that on the periphery. You know what I mean?
Often you find that in churches. A lot of people will turn to their church leaders and treat them as if they are trained counselors. So you're absolutely right. Tim, thank you for calling in, man.
All right, thanks for taking my call, and hey, keep up the good work, and hey, work on getting legal accreditation for batshittery. Let's work on that.
Take care, my man. I wanted you to have that kind of the words to kind of leave them with, but just a few keywords that kind of pop up into my head. Mm-hmm. If one of the first questions your therapist asks you is, "How's your walk? How's your walk with Christ?"
Yeah, that's a good sign you're in the wrong place. But it again, without wanting to get into all of this talk about why vibes and woo or anything like that, if you, Eric Murphy, sat down in a therapist office and were asked, "How's your walk?" you would immediately think to yourself, "I do not feel safe with this person. I do not trust this person. I do not want to share my secrets with them." And that right there is a pretty good indication you're in the wrong chair.
Agreed. And if the goal is to restore you to the flock, then the goal is not necessarily you and restoring you and making sure you're okay. So making sure that you've got those things lined up are helpful. Also, looking for therapists who utilize methods that have been shown to work. If they say, "Hey, we really want to stick candles in your ears and pinpricks on your back, or we want to do cupping or some, Reiki or crystal healing," run very fast, run very far away, and make sure that they didn't take your wallet, because there are a lot of really, really seedy people who will act like they can solve those problems, but aren't using evidence-based techniques. And so it's definitely worth looking into for that. All right. And I don't know. I don't think I'm on track well today, but I want to make sure that I'm being held accountable. Earlier on, when we were talking to our first caller about dealing with grief, I do not want to minimize the pain and suffering that a non-believer goes through in having to deal with that, whether that person means to be hurtful or not. That doesn't change the fact that it hurts, and I definitely want to recognize that. So that said, let's do this. Fernando in the UK, you're live with Eric and Christy. What did you want to talk about today?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. What topic did you want to talk about today?
Just going off the Bible, do you agree that homosexuals should be stoned to death?
Nope. I actually don't use the Bible as a guide. So no.
Even if I did, I think that would be considered a extreme interpretation by the vast majority of Christians. So I'm gonna entertain your call, but let's keep it nice and not overgeneralize too much.
Well, yeah, I mean,
tell us what else you got in mind.
Yeah, what's Fernando's religion? Like maybe you're not, a super liberal kind of, accepting or inclusive, church. What does Fernando think about it?
I'm just going off the Catholic, the old kind of conservative Catholic values.
Okay, so do you think
the Pope wouldn't say that? I'm sorry, Eric, to jump in, but I have to point out very quickly, we talked about this on the nonprofits. You can check out that conversation later at 3. Cross-promoting. Nice. We talked about it then. The Catholic Church recently made a very strong statement upsetting a lot of queer Catholics by saying that they cannot bless same-sex unions. They are still, however, inviting in and not throwing stones at literal aggressive violent stones at queer Catholics. Now, that's coming from the Vatican. We know that there's a lot of things happening in a lot of places in the world under the guise of Catholicism, which to say that it's corrupting Catholicism, I mean, that's a whole rabbit trail. I'm not supporting this Catholic idea by any means, but I, again, Fernando, have to step in and say that when you say the Bible says this, or as a Catholic, I believe that, I have to point out that you're not doing a super honest job of representing the official standpoints of either of those two positions. Is that fair, Eric? Am I being too nitpicky here? Because this feels like an important point.
I think it is. So, Fernando, we don't want to build a straw man around you. We want to make sure that the way you're asking is representing what you're trying to get across. Do you think that LGBT people should be stoned to death? Is that a value or an opinion that you have?
Actually, I think they're abhorrent. Going off the Bible, I don't agree with the.
Okay. So
official stance.
Okay. So if it wasn't,
I think.
Okay. So if it wasn't in the Bible, do you still think that gay people should be stoned to death?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I go off the Bible. That's how I get my morality.
No. I'm saying if it wasn't in the Bible, would you still think gay people should be stoned to death?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure? Because in my experience, when it comes to bigotry, people tend to read into the Bible whatever they already believe. And so my first question would be to try and determine whether or not you're a better person than that and you have a really, really whacked out view of your religious text, or if you're just a fucking bigot and you're using that as an excuse to perpetuate your own bigotry. So again, I'm trying to ferret that out. I'm not trying to give you any gotchas here. I'm being straightforward with you. Do you feel like we should, as a people, be perpetuating violence against others that way? Do you think that makes a better world?
You go against God's word, I think you do, yeah.
Okay. So how do you feel about other faiths that do that? Right. I know that there are plenty in Muslim faiths who will say, hey, we're a religion of peace, and we definitely will be once we wipe out everyone else, and they're all our religion. How do you feel about that?
I don't know, to be honest.
You don't know? Think about it for a second. I'll give you a sec. Somebody wants to kill. So here's the hypothetical. Someone wants to kill you because you're not Muslim. And they say, hey, it's in my holy book. Do you think we should be perpetuating that kind of world? Did we lose you? Oh, we lost him. Well, so here's the
I think we saw how well the argument holds up regardless.
Yeah. So here's the take. The amount of times that we get bigoted, hateful views and callers, a lot of people will say, hey, why don't you hang up on them immediately? The fact is, because this is a call-in show with a viewership that does not necessarily get to see those conversations fleshed out, I'm willing to have them simply so that they can be, so people can see where it just breaks down. The fact is, I can feel absolutely comfortable with him, with saying that person probably does not want to live in a world where he's targeted that way. And I think that if you really want to institute a fair system, utilize something called the veil of ignorance, right? If you're creating a society, imagine that you're creating a society where you don't know where you're going to fit in. You could be king or a pauper. You can be anyone in between. What society would you create that you would want to live in? Because the fact is, in doing that, you're not going to be building in reasons to legitimize atrocities. We're better than that as a society. And while I find it drastically, incredibly repugnant, I think that pointing that out is important for people who haven't gotten to hear it yet. Listen to yourself. You're being a bigot by definition. Where do you go from there? If you're a bigot and you think that you're justified, call in. But if you can't hack, then hang up, because we're going to hold you to it. That said, let's move on. And actually, it's about time to thank our patrons.
Mm-hmm.
So I am refreshing the patron list. That way I make sure that I have our newest patron.
Results up to date. They're in.
Yes. We've got some we've got some movement here. Our top 5 patrons this week are Eric Tweet, CJ Dennis, Dingleberry Jackson, Desert Heathen, and Bethany P. Marry Me V has been
dropped off the board.
Yep, and so has Balaam's donkey.
Gauntlet is thrown.
But whether we named you or not, we sincerely appreciate your support. Look, this is a nonprofit. Christy, do you want to tell people about the mountains of money that you make working with the ACA?
Oh, piles and piles of it.
Yeah.
I want to get the studios back open so that we can go back to complaining about which pizza place will take our coupons, because that's largely been the extent of the payment. I am very grateful. Like, I should point out that I am well lit, and I'm coming to you through a very powerful 4K camera that our tech crew sourced and was able to help me install and put together, and that is made possible by the patrons. But yeah, it is definitely a volunteer organization, and these lights, this camera, all of these things are in the hopes that, Eric, you and I can look at least like we know what we're talking about when we come on and do this.
Yeah, I mean, you might know what you're talking about. You've got a degree. I'm just some asshole on the internet. But until people figure that out, I am happy to do the show. All right. I guess I better plug it. Patreon.com/Talk Heathen to me. Thank you. All right. Now let's move to another color. Do you have a favorite picked out that you want to talk to?
Ooh, I suppose I'm curious about Edmond there at the bottom. How does that feel for you?
Sounds good. Yeah, Edmond. You're live.
Hey, how are you doing?
Hey, doing well. What did you want to talk about?
So I recently got, I don't have talking points, I just have a general subject. I've recently gotten into a lot of writings by D.T. Suzuki and Alan Watts and a lot of 70s kind of Eastern guru types. And then later read about a lot of atrocities that were done historically in the name of Buddhism and a lot of those Eastern religions. And I read about these horrible historical things, and I find that I can recognize they're terrible, but it's very easy for me to separate the philosophy from the event. So I'm thinking whether it's ethical to hold a view knowing that it's led to that, or can I say it was abused and it didn't really, I'm just I'm very new to this.
Sure. So the funny thing is, I think we have trouble distinguishing between a causal link and something that's just correlated, right? An example of that is a lot of studies have come out saying, oh, hey, being in a religious community, you live a longer life. Well, there's more to it, though. The fact is, being a part of a community is what causes you to live a longer life, right? Having those connections are what does it. But without that context, someone can just say, no, comes from the church. And so if you're looking at a specific, religious view, then I would decouple it from the religion first and see if this is just an example of, hey, good people doing good things, being kind to each other, and just happens to be something co-opted by the church. And just as one other example, the idea that religion needs to have a stranglehold on holidays or on social gatherings, that it needs to have a stranglehold on the media that you consume. All of those things are just keeping you in that ecosystem. But ultimately, when you break out of it and you kind of see it for what it is, you're able to get a better view of the landscape.
Yeah, I think Vice Rhino hit on this really well a couple of weeks ago when he was on, just talking about how, any clock, any broken clock can still be right a couple of times. And just because a value is held by a religion doesn't mean that it necessarily needs to be thrown out. But you just want to be mindful. You want to be asking questions. If I may borrow from another religion, if we want to use that term loosely, belief system, I don't myself identify as a Satanist, but I do maintain this very important ideal for this conversation and for any of these conversations. I have it taped right up on my computer so I can always look at it. The idea is that the spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or the spoken word. So if you want to engage in some religious philosophies, if you want to take on some of these ideals, that's not necessarily an inherently bad thing. Be mindful of your source, be asking yourself some good questions about it, but ultimately run it through that filter. Is the spirits of compassion, wisdom, and justice overriding whatever it is that you're believing? Because if so, then you are in good shape. But you can get into some real danger when what's written in your book starts to become more important than, say, not murdering children or not throwing rocks at gay people. If you don't hold on to that ideal that compassion comes first, you can get yourself into those types of situations.
And also, just to kind of dovetail into that, there are a lot of situations where even when it can seem absolutely fine, there are times when, following a specific religious, tenet can have horrible effects that you don't really recognize in the moment. So the example that I'm thinking of there is this idea of the Holy Spirit entering into you and giving you this sense of morality, this idea that morality is something that is given to us by a God. We can break that down a million different ways, but ultimately this idea that we have our own Jiminy Cricket has led to people assuming that non-Christians don't. And it becomes used as this tool to otherize groups and to, make them appear less human, and has been a cause of strife and war and pain and suffering. And you would think, you would just look at it and go, oh, well, what's the problem with thinking that my morals come from my church, right? But if that foundation isn't set on a good reasoning, then it can also be an open door for those much worse things to happen. Having good reasons for the things that you believe, I would say, would be your optimal route. I
think because I might be more comfortable with exploring these distant religions because they're not very prevalent where I am. Where I currently am living, it's unbelievably ingrained into every system, and I would never was never attracted to those and never wanted to participate in those. But I think that, if I lived, for example, in Japan, I might find in my community, for example, almost 90% of people are, and very loudly and proudly Jewish. And I'm generally not for it. I find a lot of the book distasteful, to say the least. But if I was in Japan, for example, I can see myself being like obsessed with this. Like, are you crazy? 4,000 years ago, some people wrote all their favorite stories, and it's got like miracles and kung fu prophets. It's insane.
It's cool though. I mean, as far as like fan fiction is concerned, that's super neat. Hey, Edmond, can we tell people where you're from? Is it okay to tell people where you're calling from?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay, so you're calling from Israel, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I think it's especially nice that you're calling today, because for a lot of Christian denominations, today is Easter Sunday. And
right, it's Oyster Day.
Well, Zombie Jesus Day. Actually, if you read included, Jesus isn't the only one who rose. That actually people rose from their graves and wandered the city. So that's pretty neat. But ultimately,
I looked into it. He's not a zombie. He's technically a lich. He didn't eat anyone. I think he's a lich.
Okay. Hold on a second. I don't know. Does that mean he has a phylactery?
Yeah,
there's a Jesus phylactery. Okay, and we're way off base. Edmond.
Sorry.
That's okay. We could geek out about that forever. But Edmond, what I would advise is this: you have a heritage, and you have a cultural identity that you were raised with. You know, that is a legacy that was given to you. That is yours. And I don't care what reason you have. I still celebrate a lot of Christian holidays, not because I take it from Christians. And I know people are going to say in the comments, well, most of them are co-opted from pagans, yada, yada. What I'm saying is, if you have an excuse to gather the people you love and tell them that you love them and have a good meal and share, you know, those bonds of compassion and togetherness, like any excuse you have, I think is a good excuse. You don't necessarily need to believe or follow certain religious tenets. I mean, shit, man, I think I'm as atheist as they come. And if somebody invites me over to a Passover Seder, I am in. You know,
you just missed it.
Fun. Yeah. Drink too much. You can't go. Wake up. Get some matzah farfel in the morning. I'm fucking great. That doesn't mean that I need to believe to celebrate and enjoy those things. So if you, for some reason or any, you know, think that there's some moral or ethical thing that's tying you away from, you know, being able to enjoy those things with your family, dude, it's yours. Nobody can take that from you, and you are entitled. You are allowed. You know, religion does not have a stranglehold on community and togetherness and celebrating the people that you love. So if that ever comes into conflict, I know I feel like that is in relation to what you're asking about. You have every right to it.
Mm-hmm. For the cultural sort of results of it, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I see.
But the question about its ethics, that is something you can spend a lifetime on, man. And I think Christy has it absolutely right. You know, that using that principle. Christy, could you give it to us again? That principle of.
Yeah, just the spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word. And that's the seventh of the fundamental tenets of the Satanic Temple. Do with that source material as you will, but just know that you do have permission to cherry pick and to beg and to borrow. You want to be mindful of your sources, but ultimately, yeah, so long as you're remembering that anything that's coming out of a book, anything that is coming from a pulpit, no matter where this information is coming from, you want to run it through that filter a little bit before it turns into actions.
Agreed. And
would it be helpful if I gave an example of a specific, wouldn't say belief, but a choice that you can make that for me would be derived from that? So
let's do one before we head over to the next call. Go for it.
Sure. So there's one that D.T. Suzuki writes about two poets, one Tennyson and the other one, I think, Basho. One clearly Eastern, one clearly Western. And they're both talking about a flower. And Tennyson writes about, like, well, he picks the flower and examines the roots and he learns about it. And Basho just writes about, you pass by a flower because it's nice and you look at it and you move on. And it's about a kind of philosophy of, am I a part of the world or am I outside of it, examining it? Now, the second one would lead to more, innovation. You're going to learn more. It's how you get scientific progress. It's how you learn more things. And about things in general in life, I understand one is more productive and leads to all the medicine and scientific advances we have. But I personally kind of just want to, like, walk by the flower and not really care. It gives me, it makes my day easier. But I know that I can't spread it, because one of these options is a net good.
And that's the great thing about us having this many people on the planet. My math is terrible. And the fact that mathematical and scientific advancements can increase, well-being, increase our lifespans, get us off this planet, knowing that, you would think, well, maybe the ethical thing to do is drop what I'm doing and dedicate my life to those pursuits. But the fact is, we're all working on those things together. And so don't think that you need to be compelled to get into a subject that you're not interested in. In fact, there's a parallel in the Christian church that I went to. We called it being in the world, but not of the world. And so, I don't know, I guess so long as you're remembering that your actions have an impact, and as much as you want to separate yourself away from things, you are ultimately here with us and experiencing this with us together. Christy, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, just that you can embrace a little bit of balance here. The one thing that we can say about man's search for meaning is that it's a search and that you're never really going to get there. There's not a philosophy. You find a beautiful new idea and you get really excited about it. It means so much to you. And then you realize that there's sort of an opposite and contrasting one that you find is also true. That you can examine the flower or you can simply appreciate the flower, and both are valid. So you can embrace a little bit of that disparity and just find a little bit of balance and impermanence. And we can borrow from Buddhism and Satanism and all these different philosophies. Yeah, as we discuss all of this, while acknowledging that these ideas that have been examined and discussed through, really thousands of years, at least in written history, have some merit, have some value. That doesn't mean that they should override our obligations to our fellow humans. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in our best interest. But just because a liar says the sky is blue doesn't mean the sky isn't blue.
Well said.
So thank you very much.
Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I might call in next time because I have some cultist family members I don't know how to deal with.
Sounds good. I like it. Look forward to
it. I'll tease you.
All
right. See ya. Have a good day.
Okay. I think I finally have the way I want to say it. It's our cultural inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I like that. I'm gonna say I want to use that more often. All right. Let's move on and talk to, I think this is a quick one we can go through. Lucy in Florida. You're live with Eric and Christy.
Hey.
What would you like to talk about?
Hi. First of all, I'd just like to say hello to you, Eric and Christy. And
howdy.
Today, since it's in the spirit of Easter, I would like to discuss how it's possible to have some supernatural things happen in our world, such as the resurrection of Christ, and possibly have nothing to do with God. What do you think?
I agree. I agree in the latter sense. Yeah. So if you're an atheist, that has nothing to do with whether or not you believe in the supernatural. And I've definitely seen plenty of people who say that they don't believe in a God think that they can do all kinds of crazy shit. That doesn't mean that it's true. It just means that being an atheist does not make you a skeptic.
Just check out the chat on Truth Wanted. Another fine ACA product on Friday nights.
Absolutely. Lucy, are you convinced in something like a person rising from the dead 3 days after and then bodily, rising into the heavens?
Eric, I don't know if I'm totally convinced of that.
I'm glad.
I think that it's possible, because a lot of things are possible. I do believe in ghosts.
Lucy, there's a saying. There's a saying, and the saying is, it's wonderful to keep an open mind, just not so much that your brain falls out. There are things that you can absolutely, understand about the world. Like let's just start with what we agree on. You don't think it's possible. You think it's most likely not possible, or it's very improbable that someone could rise from the dead and lift bodily up into the air and that whole resurrection story. You don't think that's likely. Why?
It's very unlikely.
Why?
I've never heard of that happening. I've never seen anything like that. I've never heard of anything like that. Neither have you. Right?
Okay, so what would it take to convince you? I'm going to put on my Christian hat for a second. What would it take you to convince you?
That's such a good question. I don't know. I would have to see it to believe it.
Well, that would be a good start, because it could be a great illusion. I've seen David Copperfield do that, well, to a degree, but it's a good start. I think if we were to determine that could happen at all, then we can start figuring out whether or not that is what happened, right? Find out whether it's possible, then determine whether it's probable. So you've got that about the resurrection. Then you teased us with ghosts. Lucy?
Yes. So, I believe in ghosts, but just really quick back on the resurrection.
Yeah. What's up?
Those are two different things. So you said something about levitation, I believe. I don't know if you meant to say something was rising in that sense, or rising as in back from the dead. Can you elaborate on that? Which one did you mean?
Sure. In the Bible, it's said that Jesus ascended bodily.
Yeah, he did both.
Yeah, that it wasn't just like a spiritual ascension, but an actual, Jesus kind of getting voiped up like an alien in a tractor beam, kind of just going up, because that's the way it's portrayed.
So I've actually read in some scientific, journals and magazines that it's actually possible to levitate matter and objects simply by using magnets and the force of sound.
Yeah,
they
absolutely
probably didn't have back then, though.
Yeah, or you can just turn a fan and put a tissue paper over it, and it will float in the air. None of this is supernatural. People coming back from the dead is something that theoretically, depending on how you define your terms, happens in hospitals every day. So I guess I'm still struggling with where we're getting at the notion of something outside of nature.
I see your point. And you're right. And there's lots of things that could be so-called magic, especially, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, that we would now describe as science. And I think that some of those things might be even still happening today that people could attribute to magic or the supernatural, even, as far as levitation, things like that. But when it comes to literally coming back from the dead, it's possible. I don't think that it's probable. And I also want to, go back to the ghosts, though, because that's just...
I would love to get to the ghosts. Let's just make sure that we put a pin in the first thing. That way we don't wind up bouncing back and forth.
It's just, I don't want to get them confused because, yeah.
No, totally understood. What I would say there is just exactly how Christy was putting it. That you described naturalistic things. These are naturalistic explanations. There's no supernatural involved. And so when it comes to other claims, we shouldn't immediately jump to it's unexplainable. We look for naturalistic explanations to see if that is the case, because it's infinitely more likely that that's the case than, you would be creating an entire new field of study. And while that would be fantastic, we just have not done that.
I agree with you, but I think what I'm saying is that there's maybe a spectrum of knowledge to where there are things that are highly explainable by naturalistic, explanations. And then, moving into more unknown explanations, which could be, like ghosts.
Well,
Or even further than that would be the resurrection. I mean, just because we don't know how it works doesn't mean that it didn't actually happen.
Sure. I mean, just because we haven't been to Hogwarts doesn't mean that you couldn't theoretically pick up a magic wand and float a thing, right? What are the odds that Hogwarts exists?
And if it is shown to exist, we can recognize, we don't understand how that works. There are plenty of things that we currently go, I do not understand how that works. I mean, me personally, I do not understand half, if even that many, of the machinations that are required to make this show possible, how the internet works, how global telecommunication, how information, how light is collected by a lens and then somehow transmitted through wires into my computer where it's interpreted and then that information is disseminated. There are people that do understand how that works. I'm certainly not one of them. But even if we go beyond that, there are things that we observe in the natural world through our telescopes, through our microscopes, that we cannot fully wrap our minds around. That's why science hasn't stopped. And to confuse that with the supernatural, I feel like is more of a linguistic issue than a logical one. And so I'd really encourage you to just think about these terms and why you are looking to come at them from this lens. I understand the desire to want to believe, but I don't know that there's anything that you've presented today that says that there's any reason to believe in the quote supernatural. It's just a different word for things that we don't yet understand. Am I confusing any part of your argument? Have I misrepresented you in any way? Because I don't mean to be difficult. I just feel like this has more to do with our word choice than anything else. Is that fair at all?
No, you're absolutely being fair. Like I said, I guess it all represents different levels of explanations on a spectrum. So you're right. I mean, different words for different types of explanations. But let me ask you guys this.
I kind of want to push back just a little bit, Lucy. Can you hear me okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to ask, what's the likelihood that Hogwarts exists?
I don't know, 0.5%.
Okay. So you think that there is a likelihood to anything, maybe?
Maybe.
Okay, so is there anything that's unlikely, or is there anything you can say for certain does not exist?
At 0%?
Well, I mean, confidently enough to make a decision based on it. Like if I were to say, Lucy, there's a bear in your closet right now. How convinced are you? Are you convinced to the point you're going to run screaming out of the house?
No, just the same as I'm not convinced that there's a Hogwarts, and I'm, not convinced that the resurrection actually happened. So I don't want to confuse you guys either. But
no, that's okay.
Sure
it's actually a really, really good thing that we get to this point linguistically, because people fall into different camps, right? There are people who fall into the camp of saying, you know what, there are things I can say absolutely for a fact, this is not true. And there are people who have everything on the table. I'm actually part of the first category, and I can say, you know what, there are some things that we can say just aren't true. But there's a whole process there. I would love to explore it with you a little more, but I do want to give time to two other callers that we've got on the line. So would you be up for maybe kind of formulating a question? The more specific it is, the more we can dial in on the details there.
Sure, that's fine. I just want to make sure that since it is Easter, that we put out there the possibility that there are things that cannot be fully explained, especially 2,000 years ago. Maybe it actually did happen and we still haven't figured out how.
The time to believe that is when there's evidence for it. And so by saying, we don't understand things, I think is a smokescreen that is used to try to validate a lot of terrible ideas. I suggest that if that's the strategy you're using to validate other ideas, that you try and break that habit, because you don't know has nothing to do with whether or not your assertion is correct.
I agree with you. Okay, I'll let you get on to other callers.
Sounds good.
Really nice chatting with you guys, and talk to you next time.
I appreciate you.
All right. I really, really want to get, so we were getting these messages saying, hey, are there any callers we need to drop? I really, really want to talk to these people.
Yeah, I was struggling with both of those too. I know we're low on time, but this feels like a conversation worth having.
Yeah. Let's start with Alex in Texas. Alex, can you hear us okay?
Yeah. Hey, Eric and Christy.
Hey,
how are you guys doing?
Hey, not too bad.
I feel like crap, dude. There is not enough time to give the subject that you're about to want to talk about enough like the attention that it deserves. And the same is true for the other person on the line.
Yeah, well,
we want to try and give it what we can.
I'll be happy to call back in next week and maybe we could talk a little bit more about it. I just wanted. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So what I was going to say is I want to give people a teaser about what you're talking about.
Sure.
It says that you're a pediatric critical care physician and you want to talk about religion and dealing with death. And
correct.
I don't even think my heart could take that conversation today, to be honest. But I will tell you that V is going to have an amazing guest on next week who I really, really want to see take the call. So please.
Okay.
Please, do you know who Gail Jordan is?
I don't know.
Oh, you got to look her up. I am a super fan. So call back next week. It is an important thing to talk about. And call early.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I will.
All right, take care.
All right. Well, thanks for taking my call, guys, either way.
Absolutely. All right. Julian, who has been waiting for 2 hours to talk to us. Julian, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, good.
Hey, man. I just wanted to say thank you. You guys helped me. I was a theist for a long time, and Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience helped me deconvert, basically.
Hey,
glad to hear it. Woo. Good on you.
Nice. What did you want to talk about?
Well, I've been an atheist now openly for about 2 years. I'm kind of still in that angry atheist phase.
Sure.
But I don't think that, I don't know, I'm starting to think that this might not be a phase for me. This might just be how it is. I've been openly gay since 2003. And because of the way I was treated by Christians, most specifically, because that was my community, I don't really think that there's a way out of this now. Like that the angry atheist thing is unfortunately going to just be stuck with me now.
Well, that's fair to say. And it's worth pointing out that there's a lot to be angry about. We talked at the very beginning of the show about how there's really no value in denying that anger. How you operate with it, what you choose to do with that anger is a very important question, but you don't owe it to anybody to not be mad. And there's a lot to be mad about. So it's valid to acknowledge and identify those emotions. Maybe tell us a little bit about what you're struggling with or what that anger means to you.
That's a great idea.
Well, I guess what I've tried to kind of funnel it into now is I've recently got involved with the Satanic Temple. So I've been trying to find more helpful ways to kind of use this to maybe combat religion in a way, but not obviously in a violent.
Channel that emotion. Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I'll say this summer, as we were watching our world burn in a lot of ways, the pandemic was dragging on in a way that we weren't understanding. There were violent protests over the death of George Floyd and all of these different things. And I remember just sitting with a friend, first time I'd seen anybody in months at the time, and just talking about like, well, what do we do with these emotions? And for me, a big part of my answer was, well, every Thursday night at 7 o'clock, I do secular sexuality, and I put some effort and energy into trying to make the world a better place. And that does do a lot for me to manage and channel that anger and to make it into something that's a little bit more empowering and a little bit less corrosive. So there is a lot of value in that. I didn't mean to keep interrupting you, though. Please go on.
Well, that's pretty much about it. I don't really feel that I can get over this. This is kind of how it is now. The damage is done.
You know,
I would feel it's unreasonable to drop it because it wouldn't be
Julian,
authentic.
Julian.
Yes.
Your healing process is going to take as long as it's going to take. And if you expect it's going to maybe be done in a day, a year, 5 years, 10 years, your healing process is yours and it's valid. And as long as that's going to take, that is absolutely fine. Christy, the way you were talking about channeling that anger, that frustration, I do the same with that in my anxiety. I call it weaponizing my anxiety. I focus in on a task. Julian, one of the things that really helped me specifically with anger was volunteering for the Hotline Project. Because
interesting.
Well, yeah, because when they train you up as a peer support kind of person, you learn to listen and talk to people, and you get lots of calls from people who are in heartbreaking situations, people who just need somebody to talk to. And it can be a great place to re-find your heart. And to find a good way of kind of working on that. Honestly, I would highly suggest volunteering for the Hotline Project for Recovering from Religion. If anybody's watching who's feeling this as well, call up the Hotline Project, tell them Talk Heathen sent you. And
we recently did an episode with Nate Smith, one of the moderators at Recovering from Religion, on secular sexuality. He spoke really beautifully about a lot of that work and what it looks like. So if it's something you're curious in, that may be a way to explore it, but certainly you can reach out to them directly. But more personally and practically and logistically, I guess I'll just say to you, as a therapist who works hugely with folks who are recovering from religious trauma, or folks who are coming from the ex-evangelical movement or from the atheist community, I have to say that 2 years is not a long time. It's a long time while you're in it, but it is not an indication of what the rest of your life is going to be like. And while you may feel a little bit stuck in this moment, it doesn't mean that you're broken. There are tons of really great resources for how to heal from religious trauma. I myself do a lot of that work. A lot of great therapists do work centered around that. And I have even led a process group utilizing a book called Leaving the Fold by Marlene Winnell. And I'd like to recommend that to you in particular as perhaps a place to get your journey started if you are looking to get a little unstuck here.
I think that would be a wonderful idea, actually.
And
doing
just
something, because basically, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Finish your thought, please.
Doing something that would kind of more or less oppose Christianity in a way that would be helpful to others would be very much in line with the Satanic Temple. So that does very much so interest me.
Awesome.
Great.
Awesome.
Good work if you can get it. Get involved.
Definitely. Hey, Julian, thank you for waiting for so long on the line. And just so you know, dude, I lurked for 8 years before reaching out to any kind of atheist community. I spent 8 years listening to podcasts and reading books. I spent 8 years before I was comfortable to even step foot into a place. And when I stepped foot into the ACA, I broke down crying because I was like, I'm home. But it can take a long time. Don't. Yeah. And goddamn, Christy, you're getting. I want to do the sound effect. I'm sorry, but I love it that you are not broken. Oh no, the sound effect didn't work.
I just feel I have a lot of work to do.
Oh.
Sure, and we all do. The
long
good
as
news is you
people-
don't need to worry about whether or not you've completed that work because you're never going to complete it. You're never going to end up because ending up's not real. But, we can get better because we're not dead yet. So until we are, I'm going to keep on working to try and make myself and the world around me a better place. And it sounds like that's the journey you're on too. So good on you.
Take care, brother. Sounds like you
Thank
got
you,
an
sir.
awesome journey in front of you. Take care.
Thank you very much. You too. Bye.
I liked that. I have like the whole applause thing. I wanted to give you a full round of applause. That fucking "you're not broken" thing hits me so deep in such a fucking big way.
Well,
that I can't stop saying the F word.
I've been pitching. I've been pitching, ACA stuff all day. I don't know when this turned into like a Billy Mays situation, but I'll just go ahead and say I definitely cribbed that from one of our better guests on secular sexuality. And these are the types of conversations we're having. I appreciate that that the atheist experience is like really combating some of these bullshit ideas, and Talk Heathen is helping to sort of tease apart some of the intricacies of these conversations. And on secular sexuality, especially when it comes to our sexuality and our sexual identity, we're also looking to help sort of heal from the trauma of being in a religious environment. So for folks that are ready to start that journey, we'd like to be a part of the solution there too, if we can.
I love it, man. I love it. And it's not just us. You see Christy and I and V and all of these other hosts, and it may seem like, all of this is seamless, but we have an amazing crew. Can we go to the crew camp? Because our crew is fantastic. We would not be able to do this without them. We love you guys.
I love it.
and I mean, really, day after day, all of these shows that we do, they are putting in their time, and we so sincerely appreciate it. So that said, I'm going to throw up some love rings. Already, 1, 2, 3. That was pretty good, right? Okay. So whether you believe or not, thank you for joining us today. First off, I know it's a holiday. We appreciate you, whether you believe or not, and you're an essential worker. I got my first Pfizer vaccine shot this week. And Christy, I think you are on your way to your second one coming up soon, right?
Yeah, I'm halfway there.
It's fantastic.
Ready to get back into the world.
I literally, as the guy was giving me the shot in the arm, I looked at him and I said, I hope you know that you're a hero. You are the closest that we're going to get on this planet to a real hero. Thank you. Whether you believe or not, I don't give a crap. If you're putting yourself out there as an essential worker, you have been doing your part. We're going to keep doing our part. We're going to get the vaccines. We're going to wear our damn masks in the meantime. We're going to make sure that we're doing it together. If you don't believe, hey, yeah, it's Easter. You can still do Easter stuff. I mean, honestly, the bunny and the chocolates and the eggs, what the does that have to do with Christ anyway? Like, they can keep the snuff
candy.
Yeah, they can keep the snuff film, and we can keep like the cool stuff. It is your cultural heritage. It is what you have been given, and you have every right to celebrate and enjoy the people that you love. Christy, I kind of want to change things up a little bit. Usually we say to those of you who do believe, we don't hate you, we just think you're wrong. But I really like your outro.
I was going to say, I hope that whether you're a believer or not, that you'd be willing to give yourself a big old orgasm today.
Or better yet, give somebody
else one.